Thanks very much, Jendo. Interesting you use the word manifesto, given that we've just had an election with a lot of manifestos. But I think, leaving aside those sort of manifestos, which I'm not sure anybody paid an awful lot of attention to, you hear the word manifesto with brands an awful lot more nowadays, because brands, one of the trends you're talking about, making much more of a societal intervention. And I think your presentation leads brilliantly into the next presentation, which is the Tony Chocolonely and Ben Greensmith. This is a really interesting company. It's in a line of companies that we've seen at the Brown Forum over the last couple of years. And you saw in the video there, Tribe would be a company trying to make a similar dent in the world. So it's not just trying to sell product, make a profit, it's trying to make a genuine change in the world today. And we have Ben Greensmith, who's the UK and Ireland country manager. He's been with Tony since September 2018. Prior to that, he spent 3.5 years at Proper Corn, who we also heard of in the Brown Forum a few years ago. And he was also a commercial director of Innocent Drinks. So all of these companies have something in common, but I think the presentation tonight will be the most brilliant example of a company with a social purpose trying to make a change in the world. Ben.
Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Ben. Can I just, before I start, can I have a quick show of hands as to who has actually heard of Tony's before today? Okay, so quite a few, so more than I was expecting. So that's great. We are a small Dutch company. We launched over here in Ireland about 5 or 6 months ago, but we have a really big and important mission. So we exist to make chocolate free of slavery and child labour, not just our chocolate, but all chocolate worldwide. So we say we're an impact company that makes chocolate. And that's my job title. So I'm Lord Chocolonely III. Everyone in our business has a Tony's title. While we've got a really serious mission, we try not to take ourselves too seriously. And my son, Archie, he's 9. He thinks I have the best job in the world. So do his mates. Like a modern day Willy Wonka without the Oompa Loompas. But the reality is that you or I can jump on a plane and in 8 hours' time, we can be in a country where you've got children being sold and trafficked as slaves just to make chocolate, which is pretty crazy. This is 2020, and this is a bar of chocolate that no one needs. We might think we do if you had a really crappy day, but you don't need it. So what I want to do is I want to tell you a bit about the cocoa industry and what I would call the story of an unusual chocolate bar. So I don't know how much you've actually thought about where your cocoa comes from, but you have to think of the cocoa industry and chocolate as an hourglass on its side. So on one hand, nearest me, you've got billions of consumers who love chocolate, don't really think about where it's coming from and how the cocoa is produced. On the other side, most of the world's cocoa comes from West Africa, and there you've got millions of farmers who are producing that chocolate. And in the middle, and this is where the problem lies, you've got 7 big chocolate giants. And these are the big chocolate brands: Mondelez, Mars, Nestle, Hershey, Ferrero, and then the big chocolate producers that you probably haven't heard of, so Cargill and Callebaut. And the power all sits with those guys who try and keep the price of cocoa as low as possible so they can make as much money as possible. And that leads to massive structural problems in the cocoa industry. Now, 60% of the world's cocoa comes from 2 countries, Ghana and the Ivory Coast. And there you have 2.5 million farms who produce that cocoa. And these are typically small family, smallholder farms. Now today, there are 2.3 million children working on those farms, which in itself isn't a problem if they're just helping their folks out after school or their grandparents, as a lot of us have done if you have a family business. But the reality is that 90% of these children, so 2.1 million children, are actually working illegally. So they are working with machetes, they're carrying heavy loads that I would struggle to carry. They don't have the right equipment, they're exposed to pesticides, stuff that none of us would want any child to be exposed to. And then in the worst cases, you've got 30,000 children who are sold and trafficked as slaves just to produce cocoa. So these are kids, my son's age, if you've got kids their age, who are basically taken from countries like Burkina Faso. They're promised an education, they're promised money to send home to their parents, but actually they're taken and they're held against their will. And if they try to escape, they are, in the worst cases, beaten and killed. So what I want to do, I want to introduce you to 3 of those boys who have a really important part in the history of Tony's and how we came about.
Je suis Kamsame Félix, j'ai 16 ans. J'ai travaillé dans une plantation de cacao de 1999 en 2003.
Cacao, 1999 en 2003.
On m'a pas payé, on m'a forcé de travailler.
Je n'étais pas payé, j'étais forcé de travailler.
J'étais forcé de travailler. Je n'avais pas la liberté pour quitter l'école.
Et puis on vous laisse jamais causer entre parents. Si on te voit causer avec ton parent, bon, on te tue ou bien tu te mates très bien là et puis on te fait changer de compte.
Pretty crazy stuff. It's kids and it's chocolate. But we'll come back to those 3 boys. And back in 2001, there were 2 congressmen in the States, so one called Harkin and one called Engel. And they reasoned, rightly so, that actually if you've got 7 big manufacturers and producers where all the power sits, then this is an issue that we can solve, because we'll get the directors of those companies around a table and we'll get them to agree that within 10 years they will rid the cocoa industry of the worst forms of slavery and child labour. And that's exactly what they did. But unfortunately, fast forward nearly 2 decades, no progress has actually been made. Whilst the agreement was signed, it was a non-binding agreement. And then in 2005, there was a Dutch TV program called Keuringsdienst van Waarde. Pardon, excuse my Dutch, if anyone speaks Dutch. My Dutch team always laugh at me. But 3 Dutch journalists in Holland were looking at brand claims, marketing claims within the food and drink industry. And on this program called Food Unwrapped or Food Uncovered, which we have something similar in the UK. And they wanted to find out, well, halfway through that Harkin-Engel or the chocolate protocol, what progress had been made. So they did a big investigation into chocolate. And one of the journalists was a chap called Tony, or Teun van der Kerken, the international name for which is Tony. And he tried to speak to all the big producers and the big manufacturers. And he even flew out to Nestlé's head office in Lake Geneva as part of this program. But no one would really speak to him, and no one was actually taking responsibility. So he's a chap that can get quite angry quite quickly. So he decided to take matters a stage further. So he filmed himself eating a load of chocolate from the big chocolate producers, of which he was pretty sure that there was some form of child or forced labour in the value chain. And he phoned the police. And he said, I am a chocolate criminal, and I'm knowingly financing slavery and child labour in West Africa, so you've got to come and arrest me. So they hung up on him, thought he was a crank. So he didn't stop there, so he took matters a stage further, and he hired a lawyer, to prosecute himself. And he took himself to court. And as part of this, he went to West Africa, and he found 4 boys, 3 of whom you saw in the video, and he basically got them to testify against him, one of whom he took back to Amsterdam and stood up in court and testified against Tony. Tony didn't go to jail. The judge said that you've got a point morally, but I can't draw a link between the cocoa that these boys have produced and the cocoa you've eaten. And also, if I make an example of you, it's going to set a terrible precedent for everyone else in Holland, and they love chocolate almost as much as we do in the UK and Ireland. So, didn't go to jail, but off the back of it, Tony produced this bar in an alarming bright red wrapper as the world's first slave-free chocolate, as a bit of a PR stunt. But that bar, and it's the same bar that we have today, sold out in hours. So we took the decision then, and it was called Tony's because Tony was the name of the journalist, and Chocolonely because it's chocolate and it's Tony fighting the lonely battle to rid the industry of inequality. So started as a PR stunt, but actually then we took the decision, if we're really serious about changing the industry, then the best way is showing that there's a different way to make delicious chocolate that doesn't involve exploitation. So that's how Tony was born. And what we do, what's our roadmap for change? Well, that's our mission on the right-hand side. But the first thing we want to do is we want to create awareness of the problems within the industry. So I wasn't aware of this before 18 months ago, before coming to Tony's. I had a really superficial knowledge of issues in the cocoa industry. We want everyone to be aware of the issues, because only if people are aware can they make an informed choice. We lead by example, and I'll tell you how we lead by example and what our sourcing principles are. And we ultimately want people to copy that. So we want to inspire people to act. So that's consumers, that's shareholders, but ultimately that's the big chocolate giants. Important, we're number one in Holland now, but we account for about 0.1%, 0.2% of all of the cocoa that is traded in the Ivory Coast. So we're still small and insignificant. So only by creating a movement can we really generate change and impact. What was really great is that last year, Albert Heijn, who are the biggest retailer in the Netherlands, agreed to adopt our sourcing principles for their own labels. So that's fab, because that means we've started to create that movement, and it's not just us. But we need more people to do that. And this is what we do. So we have a fully traceable supply chain. So 100% of our cocoa can be tracked and traced. We only source from West Africa because it's where the problems are, so Ghana and the Ivory Coast. We pay a higher price, and this is really important. If you look on the back, because poverty is the root cause of the problems, if you look on the back of the bar, you'll see the Fair Trade logo. Fair Trade is a great start. It guarantees the farmers a premium. It's the only accreditation that does, but it doesn't go far enough in our view. So we pay the Fair Trade premium of $240 a tonne, and then we pay the Tony's premium, which is a further $350 a tonne. It means we're paying about 68% more for the same cocoa. And the Tony's premium, the voluntary premium, goes direct to the cooperatives that we work with. And that enables them to earn a living income. We only work with cooperatives, so 7, 4 in Ivory Coast and 3 in Ghana. And that's because we believe they're much stronger together. And any agreement we have with these co-ops is for 5 years, so they can invest and plan, safe in the knowledge that they're going to get a really fair price for the cocoa that they're producing. And then we work with them on improving their productivity and decreasing their dependency on cocoa, should anything go wrong. And from those, I suppose, humble beginnings, we're still pretty small and insignificant in cocoa, but we've now grown to pretty much 20% market share in Holland. So we're the biggest brand in Holland. That bar there, and the good news is there are 2 bars, I think, for everyone. So all I ask is that after this, you have one for yourself, and then you share one with a friend, and you share our story. But that bar there is the best-selling bar across all chocolate in the whole of Holland. And we've done all this with a no paid media policy. So we don't invest in above the line. We invest in conversations and word of mouth. This is why talks like this are so important for us, because we very much believe that actually we would rather have a one-to-one conversation. It's quite a complex message, so having that conversation is really important. And then I don't know who's actually tried Tony's. Okay, a few, but a fair few less. It struck us that in a market and in an industry where you've got such inequality, for centuries, we've been making chocolate bars that look kind of like this. So almost could be designed on an Excel spreadsheet. And that struck us as odd, particularly in a market that is so unequal. So when you open a bar of Tony's, this is what you'll get. It's unequally divided because it tells the story of the unequal nature of the cocoa industry in its purest form. And that is a conversation starter amongst friends or at dinner parties. We've even hidden a little map of West Africa in here as well, You've got the equator running across the bottom. You've got Ghana, Ivory Coast, and then Togo, Benin. We had to stick, so this is Togo, Benin. We had to merge 2 countries because we've got a whole hazelnut bar, and we couldn't fit a whole hazelnut in. But luckily, I've never met anyone yet from Togo, Benin. And then I was asked to talk a bit about our marketing, so I'll go into that in a bit of detail, but it's really important that I think hopefully you realize we're not your typical company. The chocolate that we make, the profit that we make, the money, the conversations, they're not our goal. It's a means to achieving our goal. We exist to end slavery in the chocolate industry. That's the only thing we want to do. So the marketing exists to realize our mission and not the other way around. So we are not a chocolate company that wants to make an impact. We are an impact company that makes chocolates. The chocolate is a means to achieving that goal. And what we do, we believe we create a movement. So having those conversations and starting a bit of a groundswell, be it with consumers, with retailers, hopefully with the big chocolate companies, we'll start to create change because we can't do it alone. We need people to move with us. And the first vehicle for us to do that is showing that we're crazy about chocolate. And if you haven't tried it, and I know I'm biased, it is the best chocolate you will try. It's got high cocoa content, no palm oil. It is amazing. So we're crazy about chocolate, and we also want to become people's favorite brand. So the first thing we want to do is to change the industry, we have to do this together. So our movement is aimed at putting pressure on all areas of the chocolate and the cocoa industry. Where we focus most is on the consumer, because we believe that actually, if chocolate lovers know the real story, then they will put pressure on their favorite brands to make a change. So we do that in a Tony's way, and I suppose in a positive but activistic manner. Recently, a couple of photos here. So a couple of years ago, we brought together brands in the Netherlands, and we lobbied the Dutch Parliament to sign a petition to pass a law that forbids child labour in supply chains. It was great. We got that through. That's a picture of our head of brand delivering the petition to the Dutch Parliament. But we also made a documentary called The Chocolate Case, which I'd urge you all to watch. It's on Amazon Prime. And we will do Q&As. We'll do sessions at Art House Cinemas. We'll take chocolate and we'll have conversations and do Q&As afterwards. And then every year, we believe in 100% transparency. So we publish absolutely everything that we do in our annual report. In here, you've got our P&L, our balance sheet, the stuff that we did in the countries that we operate, the stuff that we didn't do, and our plans for the year ahead. And then we hold a big fair in the Westerpark in Amsterdam, where we had last year about 5,000 consumers who paid to come and hear what we were up to. We're not a public company. We don't have to do this, but we think it's the right thing to do. And then the chocolate is our vehicle. So we have a rainbow of colours. In Holland, we've got about 30 different flavours. In the UK and Ireland, we've got 7 or 8. But as we grow, more will come. And sharing the chocolate and getting the word out there is the most important thing we can do, because the story is on the bar and the messaging is in the packaging as well. And that's important for us with a no paid media policy. We want to become everyone's favourite brand. So when we launched in London about almost 18 months ago, we did a free chocolate pop-up. The premise there is actually there's no such thing as free chocolate. Someone is paying the price. And then bigger countries, so this is the States, they like to do things a little bit bigger. We've got a chocolate truck there. So it's so big that actually we can't rely on people coming to us. So we take our story to the US market. And then this is something that we've had 250,000 visitors to what we call the bitter chocolate experience in Holland. We've just launched this in Cologne last week, and it's an exhibition of stories and pictures from survivors of slavery and child labour within the cocoa industry. But it's all about just starting conversations and prompting people's imagination and getting them to think a little bit about where stuff is coming. And then everything we do is earned media. So if you go on Netflix, you'll find there's a program called Rotten, which is all about food and drink. And I just urge you to watch Series 2, Episode 5. It's all about cocoa. It's not paid for. It's an independent, but it heavily features the solution, which is Tony's. And then we are building a factory. So in Holland, this will be ready in about 4 years' time, but we want a visitor centre, and we want 500,000 people every year to come and visit us and learn about how chocolate is made and the process, but also how they can help change the industry for the better. And because factories are boring, we're going to stick a roller coaster in it. And I want you all to come along. And we say we're crazy about chocolate and serious about people, and that starts with our people first. Because only by ensuring that we have the best people and the most motivated can we get to achieving that mission. So if you ever swing by any of our offices, you will have lots of free chocolate. The first thing that people get at Tony's is as much chocolate as you can physically carry each and every day. To offset that, we have a sports bonus, so you can buy yourself a pair of trainers, and we encourage you to all go out and exercise. Everyone in our team has £2,500 to spend on their personal development, something that's life-fulfilling, that helps either the business or them. And also, a lot of companies don't want you to have children. We love children. We call them tiny Tonys. And if you have a tiny Tony, we'll give you £1,000. And obviously, if you create a Tony with someone else in the business, you can double it and get 2,000. And if you call it Tony, we'll give you 5,000. But no one's done that yet. So all I say is, hopefully you find some inspiration from this. We're not a typical business. We want to change an industry. But I'll leave you, I suppose, with this quote, which is, once we know and are aware, we are responsible for our action and our inaction. So every time as business leaders or as consumers, when you're at the fixture, each and every product that you buy and decision that you make is effectively a vote for the type of world that we want to live in. So I hope you take a bit of inspiration from that and enjoy the chocolate and follow us. Oh, yeah.
Thanks very much, Tony. Now, there's a slight problem. Tony has to go. He's changing house, I think, tomorrow.
Yes.
And he's got a flight tonight. So we're going to have any questions you've got for Tony, if you could have them now. And Shanda.
Yeah, I just want to ask, you said you're the #1 brand in Netherlands. What's your price point versus the other brands?
So we are typically in Holland for our big bars, we're about £2.79, £2.80. So we are more expensive than Milka or Cadbury's. We're cheaper than Green and Blacks and Lindt per gram. So premium mainstream.
Yep. Third, yep.
Hi. Really inspirational story. The question I've got is, hopefully it is driving change in the industry. What reaction have you had from the big players?
Stuff is happening, but mainly stuff is happening in West Africa. We're not seeing enough movement from the big players. There's a lot of promises about 5 years, 10 years, but you can go back 20 years and we were having the same conversation. So not enough. A lot more needs to happen. We're no further along than we were 20 years ago. In fact, the situation in terms of poverty is probably getting worse. 2 years ago, the price of cocoa dropped by 40%. All that meant is the farmers got 36% less for their crops. The price to the consumer didn't drop, and $4.5 billion came out of the value chain.
Any more? There's microphones. Oh, yeah, just up at the top there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's such a fascinating story. My question is around your no paid media policy, by nature of the fact that the previous speaker obviously is promoting paid media. So maybe I put the question to both of you, but how long do you feel that as a brand you can continue with the no paid media strategy?
It's really interesting. It's a debate we have in our business every year, because actually we could probably switch on and get a lot more awareness, but it's not right for us. It may change in the future, but as long as we're growing by at least 50% year on year, we're getting the reach and the awareness that we need to without paid media. So it enables us to do more, help more farmers in a way that we feel is true to the brand. So I know that doesn't give you a definitive answer, but it's working at the moment.
The middle there. Yeah, just over there. When you've got such a distinctive story, it creates its own media anyway.
Yeah.
It's a great story and a gorgeous chocolate, and I should say that I'm a competitor. So, do you buy your chocolate through a cooperative then, or how do you manage the fact that you pay a premium to your farmers?
So the premium goes direct. We have direct relationships with the cooperatives that we work with. So we have an impact team who there's about 8-9 of them. They spend a lot of time in Africa. They'll visit about 8 times a year. The payments for the Tony's premium goes direct to the cooperatives, and then we don't tell them what to do with it. It's not up to us. It's up to them how they invest that in their communities. So we have direct relationships with the co-ops. We also work with Barry Callebaut, because Barry Callebaut are the biggest producer of chocolate, but they're also part of the problem. And that's important for us because we want to show that this solution is scalable. And actually, 12 years ago, we were told that you will never have fully traceable cocoa from West Africa, but we've proven actually we can get there. And also we're working with Callebaut because they're part of the problem.
Ben, we have a very shy questioner here who wants me to ask the question for them. Obviously, they must be from Cork. What's your turnover?
So our turnover globally is 70 million euros. And we have a team of about 120 now.
Does that answer the Cork question? Anyone else? Because Ben does have to go.
Yeah, sorry, I have a question. I suppose as a brand and the story that you told that it's anti-exploitation, and maybe given some of the speeches at the Oscars recently, what's the company's stance on veganism and plant-based and I suppose that whole space, especially as the Dutch market is so strong as well?
Yeah, no, it's a question we get asked a lot. Our one guiding principle is slavery and child labour, changing that first. So we will do whatever it takes to have as much impact as quickly as possible. So that necessitates that we have milk in our bars, because milk chocolate is massive in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Ireland. So as long as that's the case, we will continue to get there as quickly as we possibly can. We always get more demand for vegan bars, so we have 2 in our range in the UK. But we're not a vegan brand. We're an impact brand that's trying to eradicate slavery and child labour. So we start there. We'll maybe get there next.
But you want to ask April? Oh, sorry, there.
Yeah, just Shenda shared a slide of the consumer journey earlier. Just like advocacy, is that a big part of
Yeah.
you find you get a high degree of advocacy among the consumers?
Advocacy and loyalty is really, really high. Still, we measured it last year in the UK, and it's 74% brand advocacy, 8% awareness. So it's exploding the awareness, but we know once we get the brand and the story, people get it and it resonates. But we have very high loyalty in quite a short period of time. And we'd expect the same over in Ireland as well.
Sorry, I was just wondering how the launch in Ireland has gone, or you're relatively new to the market, so how that's all panning out.
Yeah, it's going really well. I've got a couple of people from our distributor, so they tell me it's going really well. No, it is. We're in over 100 stores. We very much start at the top of the pyramid in terms of distribution and where we want to be. We want to be in the places that you've got the foodies, the trendies, and the causies first and foremost, and that's been the focus for us. And so far, it's going really well. Same in the UK. It's been great so far, but we're still small, and the awareness, the opportunity's huge.
Ben, thanks very much.
Thanks.
We could be here all night, and you missed your flight. I don't want to miss the flight.